Welcome to Quark and Roll. My name is Kwok Hui Lan. In this channel, I will interview leading intellectuals, religious leaders, and activists to talk about what does it mean to be a Christian today. This afternoon, I will speak with Miguel A, Torre, a Christian ethicist who teaches at Iliff School of Theology. Hi, Miguel, how are you?
I'm doing fine, and how are you doing, Pulan?
Good. Miguel, can you tell the audience something about your life and your work?
I'll be happy to. As you mentioned, I am an ethicist. I'm a social ethicist. Since I've gotten my degree, that's what I specialize in. I'm looking mostly at how race, class, gender, and orientation impact politics, impacts Christianity and religion in general. I've published 47 books. I have two coming out this year, and I'll be having a party next year for my 50th book. So I'm very excited about that. I do a lot of social activism. I consider myself a scholar activist in where my activism informs my scholarship.
Yeah, that is just so wonderful to hear all these wonderful books that you have produced and that you keep writing a lot more. Now, Miguel, I want to ask you, President Trump has been inaugurated for about a month, and he has brought in new cabinet members and issued executive orders and implemented a lot of changes, both domestically and globally. How are you feeling about the country and the world these days?
Hmm. Well, a lot of different feelings. I think the first feeling is I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked by it. A lot of people seem to be shocked with what's going on. But Trump was very clear what he was going to do if he was elected. And the 2025 project that was actually written down is exactly the game plan. So we knew what was going to happen. So none of this should be shocking, or none of this should be um, totally unaware that this was going to happen. So that's the first thing. Secondly, obviously, I feel a certain degree of hopelessness. The damage that Trump is doing is going to outlast this generation. It's going to go into the next 20, 30, 40 years. The changes in the judicial system, the changes on our policies concerning the environment. I mean, we can't take a 4-year break and not continue to deal with trying to reverse some of this climate change. So we're going to lose a lot of years. The rich are going to get richer, the poor are going to get poorer. So the damage is making me feel even a greater sense of hopelessness that the republic will survive. And thirdly, whenever a president expands the power of the presidency, and Trump is doing this in unbelievable ways, um, those powers never go away. So the next president may even expand it more. And my fear is we are moving, well, we've never really been a democracy. I mean, as you know, most of the individuals who get elected are elected because of the PAC money that private corporations provide them. But even that now is going to become less masked and more obvious. So this is an interesting time we're living in, and my feelings are just so mixed and so conflicting at this time.
I wonder how his policies would affect the Hispanic and Latino community that you care deeply about, Miguel.
Mhm. Well, it's going to affect every community, specifically every community of color. What we're seeing is patriotism becoming equated with white supremacy. So when people are saying we need to be patriotic, what they really are saying is we need to maintain these structures of white supremacy that have always existed in this country, only now it's on steroids. And what that means is it's going to be bad for all communities of color, specifically for the Latina community. We're seeing this hatred for the immigrant. The immigrants are, as he would say, we bring lots of crime, we're rapists, we bring drugs. we have lots of problems. When you stereotype an entire group of people that way, then that gives permission to treat that group of people as dangerous individuals. And then when he said a few months back that the immigrants are but vermin, I mean, the kind of language that is usually used by dictators wanting to eradicate a group of people, that becomes scary. So I could tell you that whenever I go traveling, speaking in different cities, I don't go out at night because I'm afraid. Occupying a Latino body is dangerous now. And I don't know what city I'm in and what's going on in those cities. So yeah, it's scarier now. I'm more scared than I've ever been, as living in this country. And to make matters worse, I am a naturalized citizen. I wasn't born in this country. I obtained my citizenship after being an undocumented immigrant for many years. So, this government has a history in the past of getting rid of people who were citizens, whether it be Operation Wetback under the Eisenhower administration, or going back when the undesirables were eliminated back in the 20s and 30s. So I guess I'm just very concerned, and I have a certain degree of fear living now in this country.
Yeah, indeed. I have heard other racial and ethnic communities expressing the kind of anxiety and fear that you just mentioned. Miguel, you have written many books, and some of the books talk about the colonial Christianity. Do you think that your ideas about the colonial Christianity will be relevant, especially in a time like ours?
Hmm. Well, I strongly believe, number one, that this country probably never experienced Christianity. I mean, from its foundation, this has been a settler colonialist venture. In other words, Christianity was used as a justification to exterminate the indigenous people, to enslave the Africans, to invade Latin America and steal the resources and the cheap labor, or under this umbrella of Christianity. So when we talk about Christianity in the United States, I kind of have to wonder if this country ever truly had any Christianity. And if it did, it really only existed among the marginalized and disenfranchised groups within this country. So when we talk about this colonial Christianity, which is basically today being manifested as white nationalism, white nationalist Christianity, um, we need to be careful in not conflating those terms, because it has nothing to do with the Christianity based on the good news of liberation preached by Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago.
So you mentioned Jesus Christ, and some of the Christians today will say, okay, what will Jesus do? And you have also talked about the politics of Jesus. Can you elaborate a little bit about what exactly will Jesus do today?
Yeah, what would Jesus do? I'm not quite sure Jesus would have to deal with a Trump. However, Jesus did deal with a colonial power. He was a colonized man of Palestine under the rule of a Roman Empire. So there are some things there in the gospel that could speak to us, that could help us. I'm not quite sure the right question is what would Jesus do, but I think maybe the better question might be, what is the liberating message of the gospel, and how can we implement it in our particular situation 2,000 years later? And if we approach it that way, then the whole message of the gospel is salvation, which, as you know, salvation, another word for salvation is liberation, the way the Greek is written. So what would the message of liberation look like? And if Jesus is among the least of these, if we say that, if Jesus says, when I was hungry, you fed me, when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink, that what you do to the least of these, you do unto me, then Jesus today is that undocumented immigrant, is the person who is the most oppressed in society. I always like to say, if you want to meet Jesus, if you want to actually look into the eyes of Jesus, look into the eyes of an undocumented Black, Latina, transgendered woman with AIDS. Because that which society despises the most, that which is the least of society, that's Jesus in the flesh, in the here and now.
I think that I cannot agree with you more, that Jesus is always expressing solidarity with the poor and the oppressed. Now, if we have such an understanding of Jesus' work and ministry, what is your message for churches and faith communities today? How would we follow the steps of Jesus?
So maybe if I could, if I could continue with that last line that I said, again, the question is not what should we do to be like Jesus, but the question then becomes, if Jesus is the least of these, if Jesus is the least among us, then what is our responsibility to Jesus in the now, in the here and now? How do we um, act? How do we behave? How do we minister to those who are the most oppressed, the most disenfranchised, the most dispossessed? So I'm less interested in trying to be like a Jesus. I'm more interested in how do I react and have a relationship with the least of these, who is the Jesus in the now.
I know that in addition to writing books, Miguel, you have made documentaries. I believe you even tried to write a novel, right? Did you write a novel?
I did write a novel, and this
Yes.
it ended up getting published. Yes.
Yes. Now, why did you use different media to reach your audience?
Mm. Well, it's interesting. On the documentary, before I did the documentary, I wrote two books on immigration, and the documentary is on immigration. I realized that more people saw the documentary than read my book. Um, more people reading my novel than some of my other books. So the issue really became, how do you communicate the message of liberation to the broadest number of people? And to do that, one has to be creative. One can't just write a book and get it published, because a lot of people don't like reading books. How do we get the news out? For example, you doing this broadcast is an example of that. Is an artistic way of getting information out to a larger group of people that normally would not read my book or your book, but yet would hear a podcast. So I think we who are scholar activists have a responsibility not just to teach in the classroom, but also to present that information in a way that is accessible to the general public. I'm not interested so much in seeking knowledge. I'm more interested in transforming society, using the knowledge that I seek to create a more just society. I think that's the real job, not only of a scholar, but also as of a Christian.
Miguel, many people admired you. That is, you work so hard, produce so much. Can you share with the audience your discipline or practices? How did you do that?
Well, my first job was mopping floors of a building, and I like to say, I didn't, whether I felt like mopping a floor or I didn't feel like mopping a floor, never mattered. I had to do it. That was my job. I never felt motivated to mop a floor. I just had to do it. Writing books is a lot more fun than mopping floors. I really enjoy it. So for me, it's not so much something that I rate to be inspired. It's a job that I do every day. So every day I make sure that I spend, 4 or 5 hours in my job of writing. And I do that faithfully. I'm not, I always joke that I type with one finger, and English is my second language, so my grammar is atrocious. but I do it because it's my job. And secondly, it's a response to the faith that I claim to have. If I really believe in this message of liberation, then I must dedicate my life to bringing that liberation to as many people as possible. And maybe not so much bringing it because I don't have it, but more like sharing the knowledge of how we can implement ethics so that we can achieve some form of liberation.
Yeah, Miguel, can you say something about why you considered writing as such an important part of your job? Because you teach, you go to meetings, you attend conferences, you travel widely, but why writing
Mhm.
is something that you are so committed? If I am not incorrect, you once told me you will wake up early in the morning and then you will just go and read books and write. Why writing is so important?
It's important because number one, very few people do write.
Hmm.
That very few people actually write books, and to write a book is to create an argument that ideally will transform the person reading the book. And it doesn't have to be an academic scholarly book. It could be a novel. It could be poetry. It could be any form of writing. It's a way of communicating ideas in an in-depth way. So for me, if transformation of society is truly my goal, then I have to express my vision, my worldview, my understanding, which is rooted in my context of a Latino male, to a broader audience. And if I can't do that, then maybe I'm not really have any good ideas. I'm just, repeating the latest opinion. But the writing forces me to really think out what I believe and what I don't believe. Um, so that's the responsibility. But on a very personal level, when I write, I really write for myself more than anyone else. Because usually when I begin to write, I'm wrestling with an issue that I don't truly understand, and I'm trying to figure it out. And the writing helps me figure it out.
Yeah, very well said. Writing for me is also a form of discovery.
Mhm.
And many people nowadays may feel very distressed or depressed. And I wonder if sometimes you feel that way. And if you feel that way, and what do you do? Or what are some of the words of encouragement for people who are not feeling very well or optimistic today?
The reason I don't think I feel depressed is because I have embraced my hopelessness. And I've written about this many times. And as you well know, I wrote
Mhm.
a book called Embracing Hopelessness. And in that book, what I argue is that once I realized that neoliberalism has won, once I realized that racism and classism and sexism and homophobia will continue way after I'm dead, then I also begin to realize I'm not the savior. It doesn't depend on me to fix all this and to create a better world. All I'm responsible for is being faithful to the praxis, the actions of trying to bring our society a little closer to justice. So once I embrace the hopelessness of the situation, I am no longer burdened with having to change everything. Instead, I could literally rejoice and be happy in being faithful to my calling as an ethicist and as a scholar. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because most people say, well, you have to have hope for the future. But I think that puts an unnecessary burden. And worse, if all I do is have hope and there's no action to change things, then nothing changes and the hope becomes useless.
So, can you tell us what are you working on these days?
Well, let's see. I have two books coming out this year. One in April called Food Fight, When What We Eat is Weaponized. It's on food justice. And then Later on in the year, I have a book coming out with Mitri Rahib on Tear Down These Walls, where we're looking at wars throughout the world and how they are used as structures of oppression. And I have a third book coming out next year it's on Jose Marti, looking at his place being stuck between empires and economics. So that's a fun project. So those are the things that I have coming out. The book I'm working on right now, I just finished walking the Camino, which is from Pamplona, Spain to Santiago. It's like a 600-mile walk. So I'm writing a book about that experience, and I'm doing a historical, ethnographical, anthropological study of the Camino itself.
Best wishes to all your work, and it has been great talking with you and hearing your passion. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
If you like this particular episode, please click like and remember to subscribe. Thank you.